Actually, I was going to put this debate here in context, so I'm sorry I turned the heat down a little bit on this, but hopefully it'll be interesting to you nonetheless. Remember I referred to the 1974 definition of aggression earlier as this Escher-esque idea. This debate that's going on now was played out between the six powers led by the United States in the 20 years before the definition was agreed upon, as well as the Russians, and it was built in certain clever ways and never resolved. And I don't think it's resolved now either. And I agree with Professor O'Connell that the state of the law is that you need to have a particular kind of link in order to be able to claim self-defense in response to an attack by a non-state group. But I do agree with Professor Fletcher that the law needs to be changed in order to accommodate attacks by groups that are not affiliated with the state. There's a few doctrines such as hot pursuit that might apply in situations like this, where a non-state group unconnected with the state launches an attack into your territory and you chase them down into the other state, and that's a justification. And there's the de minimis clause that you cannot respond with aggression to a small attack. It has to reach a certain threshold, a manifest violation of the UN Charter. That's the threshold being debated now in the working group. But I think these are not sufficient to capture the situation that we're in today, attacks by Al-Qaeda-like groups.
Let me make a comment about this. I think it's really unfortunate for academic people to be stuck in a positive law. I mean, come on. That we have to go be able to think about things in ways beyond stating what the law is. Now, the subject is called international law, not interstate law. That means, in the original understanding, was that it is the law that regulates different nations. A nation now has become identified with the state. But there is some way, some argument left for going back to the idea that when nations are in conflict, so if the Israeli nation is in conflict with the Palestinian nation, that is an international conflict and is to be treated according to the rules of international conflict. It doesn't matter, I don't see why it should matter to me, whether the particular state is recognized. It's the same thing is true about Al-Qaeda. Whether it is recognized as a state. Well, Al-Qaeda is a difficult case because it's not a nation, it's an international organization. So I'm not sure how I actually would analyze that. But if you have conflicts between national groups, it seems to me that an attack upon one part of the group is an attack upon all. And a defensive response under the law of war is then appropriate.
Okay. Could we save the remaining time, probably a little less than 10 minutes for some questions from the floor?
Oh, here we go.
That was a nice speech that you just gave us there. Although I am anything but a positivist. I'm a proponent of.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like a question to you, please. That you mentioned the police procedures and police actions were particularly effective in dealing with Al-Qaeda, and I would submit the evidence would suggest exactly the opposite, that the police actions were proven, even the casualties are going to be completely ineffective. We suffered attack after attack after attack. And we chose, rather than default back to what our understanding was of normal, to handle it in a different way. And add to that, I'd ask the three of you to suggest or discuss for a moment the concept of sovereignty. You can't have it both ways. Sovereignty is a double-edged sword. If my recollection is correct, we gave the Taliban an option of producing those responsible for the 9/11 attacks. If they didn't produce them, we would come in and remove them. You can't claim protection or inviolate territory and then sanction the actions that take place from your territory. So you can't have it both ways. Would you care to comment on that?
No, that, I mean, one of the things we have to accept is that we never captured Osama bin Laden. He's still out there. So the method that we used was not successful for that ultimate goal that we had, and I think we can hypothesize that other methods would have worked. There's new information coming out of negotiations that we were carrying on with the Taliban. They were in fact coming quite close to giving up Osama bin Laden. Remember, after 9/11, we did a very intensive effort to get the Taliban to cooperate with us, and there's now information coming out that if we continued on that tack, the Taliban would have given him up. I hate hypotheticals. I like reality. And the case is that we've got a resurgent Taliban and resurgent terrorism going on in Afghanistan. I think we have to conclude that our approach there was not as successful as others. And the general cases where you get some good long-term results with regard to terrorism, Germany, the UK, Ireland, Italy, it has taken slow, long measures of police kind. Now, I absolutely agree with Professor Weisbord. Don't forget that the rules on the use of force are what's prohibited in the charters in Article 2.4. There are forceful measures that we consider to be forceful countermeasures that I describe in my new book, The Power and Purpose of International Law, that would be permitted in cases where you have a country that's not carrying out its obligations to suppress terrorism and take action to try or prosecute, extradite or prosecute terrorists. So you may be able to do some coordinated, lower level, forceful countermeasures of the kind aimed at capturing someone like Osama bin Laden with the cooperation, for example, of the Pakistani forces. Those kinds of scenarios are, I guarantee you, what we're going to be looking to in the future. Because in general, we're considering these high-level, high-impact uses of force ultimately unsuccessful. I mean, that's what David Petraeus, as we heard at lunch, that's what he's talking about now, looking to how the UK succeeded ultimately with the IRA and going that way. Okay, well, read the book. I think you'll be persuaded.